So the 22nd and the 23rd, inshallah, they're both mukhtasar chapters. But as I was saying, that do study on your own as well. We need to dive deeper into this subject, and the amal can take time as well. So number 22 out of the 47 diseases, sins of the heart, is dishonesty, and then number 23 is negligence. Okay, so dishonesty, the definition, verse of the Quran, hadith, and a possible story, and then the causes and cures. Definition of dishonesty: dishonesty means utilizing something which has been entrusted to you without valid Islamic consent. So an amanat, someone's given you an amanat, whether it's money or whether it's a property or it's a thing, and to use it or to abuse it, not give the money back, not give the thing back, that's dishonesty. ठीक है? Blessed verse of the glorious Quran on this subject. Ghadar, Bad Ahdi, that was the previous one. Yes, so khiyanat. Dishonesty, khiyanat. The previous chapter we did was Ghadar in Arabic and Bad Ahdi. Blessed verse, Allah Almighty has stated in the glorious Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la takhunu Allah wa rasula wa takhunu amanatikum wa antum ta'lamun. So khiyanat is dishonesty, and if you see in the Arabic, we can see the word takhunu twice. O believers, do not be dishonest to Allah and the Messenger, nor purposefully be dishonest in your trusts. So the Arabic word for dishonesty is khiyanat, and in the sort of you do not be dishonest, in that present form is takhunu, it comes twice. Do not be dishonest to Allah and the Messenger, no purposefully be dishonest in your trusts. A glorious hadith about betrayal of trust is a sign of hypocrisy. The beloved of the sublime Prophet ﷺ warned, whoever possesses three vices is a hypocrite, even if he is punctual in his salahs and his fasts. He's a munafiq, he's a hypocrite. A munafiq, when he speaks, he lies. When he makes a promise, he breaks it. When he's entrusted with something, he betrays that trust. Okay. What is the ruling on dishonesty? It is compulsory. Wajib. Wajib for every Muslim to honor the trust placed in him by another individual. Dishonesty is forbidden, haram, and leads to hell. So amanat dari, honesty is wajib, fard, and dishonesty is haram. Whenever we use the word wajib, sometimes we refer to a farz as a wajib as well. So wajib is a broad, wajib means necessary, it includes farz as well. A story, a devastating consequence of a betrayer. Some people approached Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, cousin brother of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and narrated a tragedy to him. They said that during Hajj, a place called Sifah, one of our companions died. When we dug a grave for him, we noticed a huge black snake sitting there, which had occupied the entire grave. Abandoning that grave, we dug a second grave, but we witnessed the same spectacle. That snake was in that second grave as well. We have approached you for a solution to this terrible dilemma. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu replied, he is being punished for his betrayal. Bury him in either of those two graves. I swear by Allah Almighty, even if you dig the entire earth for him, you will witness the same spectacle. Even if you dig the entire earth for him. Eventually, they buried him in one of those snake-filled graves. On their return home, they handed his luggage over to his family and inquired from his widow about his misdeeds, to which she informed he used to sell food fraudulently by taking out a portion for his own family, and then to make up for the missing share, he used to add non-genuine ingredients. Okay? So, do number mal, bechna, dhokha dena, whatever you're selling, especially when it comes to business, whatever you're selling, if something's not pure, just admit it to your customers, and then you can sell, as long as you're telling them, you're revealing whatever weakness there is in them. Yeah. It's like in Pakistan, they क्या दूध में पानी मिलाते हैं, ठीक है, तो वो धोखा देना वो भी नाजायज़ है. हाँ, वो बता दें, I'll put 2 cups of water in there, ठीक है, then it's not dhokha. But obviously people want, it's up to people if they want to buy something. 6 causes and cures for dishonesty. The first cause of dishonesty is a bad intention. Just as good intentions or cures and remedies for your character and personality, similarly, the poison of a bad intention will invalidate, obliterate, and wreck your good deeds. The cure for this is for you to rectify your intention and tell yourself, Allah Almighty is able to grant me success in this world and the next in exchange for my good intention and honesty. Why should I incur loss in both worlds by betraying someone's trust? So you don't use betrayal as a shortcut to success. Number 2, the second cause of dishonesty is possessing a habit of deceiving. Some people just have a habit of deceiving people. The cure for this is for you to contemplate about the harms of deception. Dishonesty is an extremely despicable and detestable sin, such that the beloved Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam announced that he wanted no association with the fraudster. Deceiving is not a quality of a Muslim. Deception will damage your integrity as well as cause people to lose trust in you. This is why you should always respect the Muslims and tell yourself that it is certainly unwise to do something which brings you short-term benefit but long-term loss. Number 3, the third cause of dishonesty is an absence of trust in Allah Almighty. An absence of trust in Allah Almighty. The tawakkul Allah. Tawakkul is trusting Allah Ta'ala, isn't it? Due to weak faith, a person assumes that betraying the trust of other people is the only avenue to success. The cure for this is for you to completely trust Allah Almighty and inculcate this Madani mindset inside yourself. Any avenue in this world that leads to the displeasure of my Creator Azza wa Jal cannot lead me to felicity, bliss, happiness. Therefore, I shall abandon this path of betrayal and embark on the path of honesty. The fourth cause of dishonesty is satisfying personal desires. Satisfying nafsani khahishat ki takmeel. Nafsani khahishat ki takmeel. You can cure this by scrutinizing your ego, your nafs, understand its tricks and deceptions, and being determined that you will refrain from fulfilling its unlawful desires. Furthermore, you should make practical efforts to abstain from these desires in order for you to avoid the major sin of dishonesty. The fifth cause of dishonesty is a habit of causing harm to other Muslims, which leads to several maladies of the heart, dishonesty being just one of them. The cure for this is to sympathize with other Muslims and contemplate about the punishments for betraying them. Some people are just like, it seems like they're empty of sympathy, doesn't it, self-centered, and it's like, logon dhokha dena is an art form. They've turned it into an art form, betraying. Some people are very, very proud about it. I can prove black to be white, white to be black. Some people have turned, not some people, a lot of people have turned betrayal into an art form, something to be proud of. How I can run rings around people, just watch this. Ye to mere, wo kya kehte hain, bhai haath ka khel hai. What's the phrase in Urdu? Oh, that's nothing for me, that's easy. Sadly. So some people, for them, it's just a joke, just betraying people. But again, lack of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're sincere and you're afraid of Allah ta'ala and you're thinking about Judgment Day, then deceiving people is not a joke, is it? Number 6, the sixth cause of dishonesty is bad company. Sometimes a person is susceptible to all social influences around him, whether they are positive or negative. This will obviously affect his personality and character. In particular, human beings are quick to absorb the dishonesty of untrustworthy people. The cure for this is for you to associate with pious, honest, God-fearing individuals in order to save yourself from not only this fatal disease, but others as well. Yeah, so you are your company. Hang about with people with weak trust in Allah Ta'ala. Your trust will be affected. If you hang about with people who are vehmi and always suspicious and doubtful, you'll become suspicious as well. If you hang about with people who are really judgmental, you'll become judgmental. So you pick up really our company influences on us at a subconscious level. Sometimes we don't think we're being influenced by something. We don't realize the influence, but it's really subtle, and it can show when you do see it. It's too late. It's become a part of your character. So influence of society, influence of friends can be very, very subtle, and sometimes we don't notice we're being influenced. We think, I walked in there, whatever it is. I'm not affected by them. I hang about them, but they don't affect me. But other people might be noticing slight nuances, sort of differences in our behavior. So sohbat obviously is very, very important. Sohbat is very, very important. I'm just reading another verse of the Quran Sharif in one of my early morning classes today. Do not sit. Quran Kareem says, do not sit with people who mock the verses of Allah Ta'ala. Any mehfil where and I was reading the tafsir, like any comedy sort of environment or theaters, any environment where the verses of Allah Ta'ala and Deen is being mocked. Don't go there in the first place. If you're there, put an end to it, stop it, speak against it. If you can't do that, then hate it and walk out. Don't just stay there and hate it or walk away from it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. I just got a few fatwas. Even obviously we're talking about dishonesty, so it's important to Sayyidi Ala Hazrat Rahmatullah his son Mufti Mustafa Raza Khan. There's a fatwa Mustafiya. There's a fatwa there. If you borrow, so they were from India, and he was asked. Ala Hazrat's son was asked if a Muslim borrows money from a Hindu, borrows qarza from a Hindu, and now he can pay it back, but he doesn't give it back despite being able to. So Mufti Mustafa Raza Khan, Mufti Azam, he said, "Wafaye ahd Musalman par farz hai, qarz lekar wapas na dena haram hai." Fulfilling your promises, even with a non-Muslim, even if it's a Hindu, is farz. So not giving a qarz wapas even to a non-Muslim is haram. Amir al-Sunnat, founder of Dawat Islam, he states غیر Muslim ko bhi dhokha dena haram hai. So even deceiving a non-Muslim is haram. So breaking promises or breaking treaties and agreements is haram with even non-Muslims. I'm just looking at a few fatwas, but the mafhum of them is all the same. That Hindustan के कुफार का माल चोरी डाका मकारी फरेब से हासिल करना जायज़ नहीं है. Because the fatwas are in front of me, they're from scholars who are in India, but it's a bit in the same kind of situation. वहाँ के if it's haram to deceive the Hindus of India, it's haram to deceive and take the money of non-Muslims in this country as well. You know, when Sood is a very vast issue, interest. In the Hanafi school of thought, you can, Sood is always haram. But if a non-Muslim gives interest, if he wants to give it a non-Muslim, we can take interest from a non-Muslim. That's not interest. So Sood haram hai. And so I need to be careful in my words as well. Sood is haram, interest is haram. If a non-Muslim gives it, giving it to a non-Muslim is not allowed. Only, well, I'll touch on that in a second. Taking extra money from a non-Muslim is fine. That's not interest, even if he calls it interest. Islamically, it's not sood, even if he calls it sood. So if you lend a non-Muslim money and you stipulate that he's going to give you more, that's permissible. ठीक है. So सूद गैर मुस्लिम से सूद लेना जो वो जायज़ है, वो सूद है नहीं असल में, सूद है ही. It's not really, even about I'm saying सूद लेना, it's not really सूद, it's not interest, even if he calls it interest. So that's not धोखा देना, that's not deceiving someone. With regards to whether or not you can take you can borrow money from non-Muslims and then give them extra. Almost all of our scholars agree that one wherever it's necessity, like one house is necessary, so a mortgage is okay for one house. But they're all credible. That's one opinion, that only one mortgage allowed because that's a necessity. But there are credible scholars who, even though the first group of scholars say you're not allowed to take more than one because it's not necessary, there are credible scholars like Mufti Shamsuddin Hekman Mike. He's of the opinion that even more than one is permissible, even if it's not necessary. They're okay as well. Student loans, they believe they're okay. So there are credible Sunni muftis who have that opinion as well. So because it's between a Muslim and a non-Muslim, so there's leniency when there's a Muslim and a non-Muslim. But two Muslims, no giving or taking. The leniency is between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. All our Hanafi ulama agree that you can take interest. I'll just repeat that. All of them agree that you can take interest from a non. It's not really interest. It's not interest. It's not interest. It's just extra money, even if he calls it interest. So the difference of opinion in our Sunni ulama, and both camps are respectable, so we respect both views, is when it comes to giving interest to a non-Muslim, giving, is that only restricted to necessity, or is that more free? And those are the two opinions, and they're both respectable opinions. As far as the banks are concerned, again, just to more tahqiq is required, but the banks, can we take interest from them? If we're 100% sure that a bank is totally owned by non-Muslims, the Malik, there's no Muslim shareholders inside them as well, so it's totally all non-Muslims, then you can take that interest. Again, it's not interest Islamically. Okay, it doesn't fulfill the criteria of interest, even if they call it interest. Okay. Because the banks in this country, we're not sure if they're all Muslims. Sometimes you hear they're all Muslim shareholders. We don't know if there aren't any Muslim shareholders today, there might be tomorrow. So it's always safe. It's safer to not take interest from the banks of this country, because even though they've got non-Muslim main owners, but there's probably Muslim shareholders. But again, I'm not saying, I'm not giving you like a concrete fatwa that it's haram to take from the banks, because I don't know 100% if there's Muslim shareholders in these banks or not. So it's very clear that if there's no Muslim shareholders in the banks in this country, and they give you extra money back, even if they call it interest, it's not technically sood, it's not interest. So just say yeah. But because it's, to me personally, it's unknown whether there are Muslim shareholders or not, so it's just best, safer to not take. But that doesn't mean I'm saying it's haram to take from. There's more tahqiq is required for that.
I'm just going to ask a question on dishonesty about, so there's certain types of possible dishonesty that has become normal, like in takeaways, for instance. They always say lamb, and it's not lamb. With that, because I know that, inshallah, there will be some that don't deliberately do that, because everybody puts lamb, so they just put lamb and chicken. They don't put sheep, lamb, and chicken. Because one of my friends, his is lamb, and his price is a little bit high, and he's always explaining that mine is real lamb. And if that was lamb, there's no way they could sell it.
Well, it is deception.
It's a deception, but would it still count as deception, even that they haven't really thought of it that way? They've just got the menu done.
I don't think everyone knows that's deception. That's straightforward lying, isn't it? And it's not one of the permissible cases of lying either.
They know, don't they? They know what they're selling.
They know what they're selling. So it's lying, isn't it? We could go on. There's so many ahadith about us. Specifically, this is an interesting topic about business, and we don't hear a lot about this. One hadith comes to my mind about the Prophet ﷺ saying that if you've got something, if you're selling something faulty and you're selling it without showing and revealing the fault, then the la'nat of Allah is upon you. So there's so many ahadith about how to do business that we've never heard and no one's ever told us. So I would like to one day, I've got a bunch of them saved up, because I did try to, in my khutbahs and stuff, Jummah khutbah, I tried to teach them. But yeah, specifically deceiving people during business, there's a lot of hadith on that topic. So whether people have normalized the haram doesn't make the haram halal, does it? It just means that we're closer to Qiyamah. Normalizing something evil, it doesn't make it right. You still gotta, it just means it's an extra challenge. And it's not impossible, I think. Take away people to sell their products without lying. I don't think it's too hard. It's not too hard, is it?
It doesn't do it, so it won't do it.
It's not as hard as they might make it out to be. In every profession, you can cut corners. You can cut corners in the imamut profession. Namaz, leading namaz, you can cut corners. There's no profession. Not doing your job properly. There's no profession that can't be done well and in a fraudulent way.
Definitely profession.
Might give you examples later. Come with us.
Might be better to leave that.
Negligence. Let's cover just so we can cover two chapters in one lesson. Number 23, negligence. Sallu ala al-Habib. Definition of negligence. This refers to negligence in religious matters and heedlessness caused by a lack of vigilance and care. Okay? So negligence, ghaflat. Being negligent in religious matters, or ihtiyat ki kami, being not being vigilant. A blessed verse Allah Almighty says in the glorious Quran, واذكر ربك في نفسك تضرعا وخيفة ودون الجهر من القول بالغدو والآصال ولا تكن من الغافلين. And remember your Lord within your hearts humbly and fearfully, and softly with your tongues, such that only you can hear yourselves, morning and evening, and do not be of the neglectful ones. Blessed hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I fear negligence for you. Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu anhu returned from Bahrain with some tax money which was imposed on non-Muslim citizens. Hearing about his arrival, all the Ansar, the Sahaba of Medina Sharif, they prayed Fajr Salah in the company of the beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After the Salah, they all approached the beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He alayhi salatu wasallam looked at them and he smiled, and then he announced, I assume that you have heard of Abu Ubaidah's arrival and that he has returned with some money. So you're all here to get a share of that money. To which they answered, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is true. And he responded, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, share good news and be hopeful of that which will please you. I swear by Allah Almighty, I do not fear poverty for you. I do not fear poverty for you. Rather, I fear that the world will be spread out, increased for you, just as it was spread out for the nations before you. You will also compete with each other over this world, just like previous generations did. And this will make you negligent, just as it did to former communities. So Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, I know you're not going to be poor. Nabi Bakr we've seen the future. I know Muslims are going to be rich. I know my ummah is going to be rich. That's not going to be a problem. The problem is going to be the negligence that comes with the richness. So he said, I know you're not going to, poverty is not going to be a problem for my ummah. It's the negligence that comes with it. And the competing like previous ummahs. So the Israelites, the Jews and the Christians before, and the previous communities, how they were became negligent. Caution about negligence. Negligence in fulfilling religious commandments which are obligatory, fara'id, necessary, wajibat, and emphatic sunnahs, sunnati mu'akkada, is unlawful. It's a sin and leads to hell. Therefore, all Muslims must refrain from this. So when we talk about what is a sin in Islam, sin is missing a wajib or a fard or a sunnati mu'akkada. Sunnati mu'akkada. Fard and wajib, what's the difference between fard and wajib? It's very technical, really. It's the same thing. Fard and wajib shouldn't be so. Sunnati mu'akkadas, if something is sunnati mu'akkada, for example, the sunnats before Zuhur, so the 4 sunnats before Jummah of sunnati mu'akkada, and the 4 after Jummah of sunnati mu'akkada as well. Then there's another 2 sunnats on there. Those are ghair mu'akkada on Jummah. Those 2 sunnats are ghair mu'akkada. But any sunnati mu'akkada, if you leave it once or twice, it's not a guna. But making a habit of leaving a sunnati mu'akkada is a guna. But if you leave a wajib or a fard even once, that's a guna. Okay. Leaving a wajib or a fard even once is a guna. Story, reward for a negligent worshipper who repented from his carelessness. Sayyiduna Ali ibn Hussein radiallahu anhuma reports, we had an extremely pious neighbor who prayed salah excessively to the extent that sometimes his feet would swell due to prolonged standing. He stood in namaz so much that his feet would be hurting, but he'd carry on. That was his passion. That was his shawk, his zawq. No one forced him to do it. His eyesight had become weak as a result of profuse crying in fear of Allah Almighty. One day his family and some friends suggested that he should get married, hence he bought a maid. The worshipper was unaware of his maid's fondness for singing. One day whilst he stood in his prayer area praying salah, the maid began to sing loudly. The voice of the song distracted the devout man from his salah, and despite trying his best to remain focused in prayer, he failed. The maid suggested, my master, your youth is drawing to an end. You abandoned worldly desires in the prime of your youth. At least now you should benefit from me. This temptation drew a veil of negligence over the pious man, and consequently he diverted his attention away from his salah towards his maid. When the worshipper's brother learned about this dilemma, he wrote a letter of religious counsel, the contents of which were as follows. In the name of Allah Almighty, I begin with the most merciful and the most kind. This is a letter from a caring, sincere counselor to a man who no longer experiences the sweetness of zikr or pleasure of the Quranic recitation, a man from whose heart humility and fear of Allah Almighty have departed. I have heard that you purchased, this is a letter from a friend writing to his friend, I have heard that you purchased a maid and in exchange for her you have sold your share in the afterlife. You sold a huge asset in exchange for an insignificant one. You sold the Quran in exchange for songs. I warn you about something that terminates desires and extinguishes passions. When it arrives, your tongue will become mute. With the strength in your body will vanish. You will be dressed in a shroud. Your family and neighbors will no longer enjoy your presence. I warn you about a raw when people will drop to their knees due to the magnificence of the Almighty King. My brother, I warn you about the wrath of Allah Almighty. He wrapped up the letter, and the letter finishes. He wrapped up the letter and had it sent to the worshipper. The worshipper received the letter whilst indulged in a party of entertainment and dancing. As soon as he read the letter, his body trembled due to fear of Allah Almighty. Froth emerged from his mouth. He became oblivious to all his worldly pleasures. He stood up and broke the wine vessels, and furthermore he freed his maid and swore, "From this moment onwards I will never eat or sleep." Later, following his death, his brother, the writer of the letter, saw him in a dream and asked, "What did Allah Almighty do with you?" And to which the repentant answered, so this is a dream after he's died. "In exchange for that maid, Allah Almighty granted me a heavenly maid, a hoor, who serves me pure wine from heaven," during which he remarks, "Drink this pure wine in exchange for the earthly wine that you shunned for the sake of your Lord Almighty." Sallu ala al-Habib, sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad. So alhamdulillah, we've covered two subjects today. May Allah give us tawfiq to act upon them. Negligence, and the one before that was dishonesty as well. So the negligence was just make sure that we're vigilant with regards to our farz and our wajib and our sunnati mu'akkadas. It is possible to act upon these things. It's not as hard as, yes, in our community, knowledge of fara'is and wajibat and sunnati mu'akkadas, we're not really taught in detail. But it's not hard to act upon. These things just depend about your sohbat, about your company, and as long as you've got tawakkul, as long as you're not chasing the dunya, not obsessed with it. Of course, you've got to earn, you've got to work, you've got to have money to support yourself, be free, not depend on people. But it is possible to act upon everything that we're reading. Sometimes we might hear these stories and we think these are the stories written in books that were written 600, 700, 800 years ago, in the time for the Sahaba, so they're not relevant to us, or it's impossible to act upon them. It's very possible. So it's just a matter of attitude, being in the right company. Yeah, you will find it impossible if you're in certain company, or if we've got in our heads that I've just got to replicate whatever my father and my chachi and my brother did, then you are going to find it very hard to do this. If we're trying to, if you've got in your heads that I've got to emulate everything that our forefathers have done, and then try to practice it at the same time, then you're going to find it very, very difficult. So we've got to understand that whatever we see in our brothers, on our relatives, and wherever we've been exposed to the social conditioning in the Asian community from childhood, a lot of good stuff, mashallah, there's a lot of positive stuff, but there's a lot of our elders, Allah bless them, guide them, protect them, forgive them, but a lot of the action is just based on culture, not on being educated in their deen. And when you have for 5, 6 generations of not proper education, then even the definition of education is it's not black and white, and the standards of education, or what education is, not black and white. It's very confusing. So that's why it's really important for us to turn back to a proper education, which is in the books, and sitting with ustads. And I've said this many times, not just Jummah khutbahs, and not just programs, not just jalsas, the books, inshallah. Jazakallah for your attendance. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. Astaghfirullah. Ji.
Rather start the story that you mentioned, when they were digging the grave and they found a snake, and then the people that went to inquire about what could have been a cause of this. Question comes to mind, that like revealing and concealing someone's faults.
Yeah.
What would be the intention behind that?
I mean, the intention behind that could be so that other people can avoid that sin. And just an urge, if we didn't know what that, the whole purpose of that story wasn't. What was the purpose of us reading that story today? So that we don't, not just to understand that there was a man who had a snake in his grave. It's the why, which is the purpose that we're studying it. It's the dishonesty. So it's that we don't lie to people, we don't dishonest. So that the intention would be log ibrat hasil kare.